Okay, so let's try and wrap this all up at the beginning of this new week. What does it all mean for investors? Joining us is Emily Sanders, CEO of Sanders Financial Management. Nice to see you on this side of the pond, Emily.
Good morning, Ross.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
So look, I'm intrigued with what you think of where we're at last week. We had the first sort of big earnings week last week. IBM, people looked at that on the good side. They looked at JP Morgan on the good side. So it seemed to ignore really the bad points of the GE earnings report, or what the bad points of the Bank of America report. Are we in a situation where investors just want to focus on the positives?
It appeared that way last week with all the major market averages up 7%, Ross. But really, the bulk of the earnings releases are coming this coming week, most of the Dow components and so on. And we really don't expect the news to be as rosy as it was from Goldman and JP Morgan.
But if we still just focus on the, but here's the point, this is what I'm saying, if we still just focus on the positives, then it won't really matter, will it? I mean, you've got to, what, American Express, Apple, Boeing, Caterpillar, Coca-Cola, McDonald's. I mean, those guys are likely, I mean, if you look at, what, Coke, McDonald's, Microsoft, they're likely to have fairly stable numbers, aren't they?
Most likely stable, but of course, you know, everything is worse than last year, and we're still in this less bad mode. It's less bad than we expected. However, you know, trading has been light. It's summer. A lot of traders are away. And so we really expect things to be either flat or somewhat trending down in what we believe is a secular bear market.
Emily, in your notes you said you think this is a balance sheet recession versus a business cycle recession. We're going to hear from Ben Bernanke on Capitol Hill the next couple of days. He's likely to say this recession is probably drawing to a close. Do you think he's just being a cheerleader here?
Well, he has to be. Actually, this recession is already in its 20th month, and a typical business cycle recession is about 10 months. Now, the longest recession, as we know, was 43 months back in the 1930s after the Great Depression. So this is really structurally different. In this recession, unemployment is a leading indicator, not a lagging indicator. And unemployment is continuing to go up, and defaults on foreclosures of commercial real estate is due to go up quite a bit next year in the United States when loans are maturing. We've already seen what's going on with residential real estate. So Ben Bernanke, you know, has to be a cheerleader, and there's a lot of pressure on him to discuss the exit plan so that the current stance of the Fed doesn't get too inflationary. But really, as prior guests have mentioned, most likely the Fed will continue with its zero to low interest rate stance for at least another year.
Emily, hi, this is Christine all the way here in Singapore. In your notes, you said you're long-term bullish on China. What gets you excited about the country?
Well, besides the 1.3 billion population and the rising middle class, in a sort of perverse way, because it's a controlled economy, the government has done a much better job with their stimulus than the U.S. has. The U.S. $787 billion stimulus has been slow to trickle out to the common populace, whereas China's stimulus had an impact almost immediately. And also, because China controls the banks, they're doing a lot more lending. Whether the lending is warranted or not to good credit quality, it's hard to gauge from where we sit. But in the U.S., you know, lending has come to a virtual stall, not a complete stall. And so because of the managed economy aspects and because of the rising consumerism in China, we feel that China's moving from a exporting economy to a rising consumer economy.
All right. Sounds exciting. Emily, thank you very much for that. We want you to continue staying on with us in the show. Emily Sanders, CEO of Sanders Financial Management. And we're going for a quick break. Still to come on the show, we have one very important guest. We'll get the very latest details on Jakarta's deadly bomb blast and find out how the attack will affect the country's economy. Welcome back to Worldwide Exchange. Indonesian police confirmed over the weekend that the attacks on 2 luxury hotels in Jakarta on Friday mirror previous bombings by the militant Jemaah Islamiyah group. How will this impact Indonesia's economic outlook? Joining us for more is Indonesia's Minister of Trade, Mari Pangestu. Minister Pangestu, thank you very much for being with us. Are you confident that, you know, the economy is going to come out of this relatively unscathed?
Of course, we don't know the full effect yet because we haven't had a working day since Friday. but we are relatively confident that there won't be a negative impact on the economy, given that the fundamentals of the economy are strong. And even though the stock market and the rupiah were impacted on Friday, but the impact was very, very small. And we expect when the markets open tomorrow that things will probably go back to normal.
There's been a lot of negative publicity. Are you at all worried about the sort of how Indonesia is perceived by foreign investors?
Well, I suspect that foreign investors take a more medium-term and longer-term view, and they will review the fundamentals of the Indonesian economy, which remains very sound. We've been very resilient with the global economic crisis. As you know, we have macro stability, we have growth. In the first quarter, our growth was 4.3%, one of the highest in the world amongst by any counts, and we expect to grow 4 to 4.5% this year, and inflation's under control, and export projections are looking better, even though it's going to be contraction compared to, I say, beginning of the year. I was expecting a much larger contraction of -20 to -30%. We've since revised it with, we've seen bottoming out and coming out with positive month-on-month growth, so we're projecting at -15% right now. So there's a lot of improvement, and what's important is also that there's continuation of the president, as you know, has just won a landslide victory. So the economic reform agenda will be continuing.
Nonetheless, Mr. Pangestu, often when these things happen, it does cast a little bit of caution to those business travelers, particularly when you get foreigners targeted. Can you compare this to what we saw in Bali a few years ago and how that impacted tourism there? And what sort of steps are you looking to take in Indonesia to try to convince business travelers that it is safe for them to go there?
Well, I think the fairer comparison is probably not Bali, because Bali was a much bigger casualty. It's more comparable to what happened in 2005, which was a similar size and also located in Jakarta. And I think if you look at the market rebounding, it's almost within a few days the market went back to normal. But in terms of travel and tourism, according to the Garuda and tourism people, in the incident in 2005, it took about 3 or 4 months before travel resumed normal. In the case of Bali bombing, it took a much longer recovery. I think it was almost 2 years before it recovered. And also you have to see, I think investors and travelers will also see it in the wider context of the whole worldwide situation, which has changed, I believe, since the first Bali bombing in 2000. And that what is important also is that Indonesian government has a mechanism to respond on the security side, and we will of course be increasing and heightening our security alert as well as our response to ensure that the perpetrators will be caught as soon as possible.
What sort of progress have you made in this fight against terrorist groups in Indonesia, and what are you doing to reassure foreign investors it's safe for them to do business there?
Well, basically, our record for the last 4 years, we've had great stability in terms of the security front, and a much a wider call by the larger community in Indonesia to also help with watching out for these terrorist groups, and obviously a much better coordination in the intelligence services and so on and so forth. But since that's more the security front, I'm confident that our government will, with the cooperation of obviously with other countries, to really be on top of the issue.